sojourner truth. Ain't I a woman? Ain't I a woman? Say sojourner truth. Ain't I a woman? I can work as much, eat as much as any man when I can get it.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Through the Flowers Celebration Sunday at the Auerbach Museum. I'm Judy, president of Through the Flower. Today is such a memorable occasion for us as we celebrate over 3 decades of accomplishments by Judy Chicago Through the Flower. On behalf of Through the Flower, I'd like to welcome our honored guests, Dean Garber Dewey of Penn State, our panelists, and all our loyal supporters and friends who have come here today. I'd like to introduce the board of Through the Flower. Of course, everybody knows Judy Chicago, our founding director. Martha Burke, our vice president. Patrice Emery, our secretary-treasurer, and also the chair of the advisory committee for this event. And Through the Flowers executive director, Donald Woodman. Before we start the program, I'd like to thank the following people: our advisory committee, all of whom have taken time from their busy schedules to volunteer and work so hard in helping to make this a success. We'd also like to thank our underwriters and sponsors who have contributed to make this event possible today. And our special thanks to the Albuquerque Museum, to Kathy Wright, the director of the Albuquerque Museum, for hosting today's events. Today's program will start with a panel discussion. Following the discussion, we're going to have a short intermission while we set up for the 3 p.m. concert. There are tables outside that you can buy books by Judy Chicago and have her sign them, and there will also be selected Through the Flower merchandise for sale. Also, for those of you who have not yet purchased your tickets for the concert, you can buy tickets at the Through the Flower table at the far end. Proceeds from the merchandise and from the ticket sales will benefit Through the Flower. At this point, I'd like to make the following announcements. First of all, there's no photography, and we also request you to turn off your cell phones. Before we proceed, we would just like to announce that this is being filmed by Penn State in connection with the Judy Chicago Art Education Archives and the Dinner Party Curriculum Project, both of which have been gifted to Penn State. The films will be maintained in the archives at Penn State and will be webcast from their collection site. We would also like to extend our deep appreciation to Dr. Karen Kiefer-Boyd for all her hard work, and to thank her and her volunteers for making this film possible. And now Kathy Wright, the director of the museum, will say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great honor to be here today, and I want to thank you all for being here on this great day of celebration. Just a couple of points, business points. If anybody needs any hearing-assisted devices, you can see Jessica, who will be in the back of the room with those. And I just wanted to mention, too, that our cafe will be open until 3 o'clock. So in that break between this panel and the concert, if you'd like to have a glass of wine or something, we're promoting that too. I first met Judy Chicago and Donald Woodman about 10 years ago when the Fine Arts Center in Colorado Springs hosted an exhibit curated by Dr. Vicki Wilder Thompson called Trials and Tributes. It was a small retrospective of Judy's seminal art projects. I say small, but it was huge. But it was such a small part of her overall career in art. So when I came to the Albuquerque Museum about 5.5 years ago, I was delighted to find a core representation of the Birth Project as part of our collection, which Judy generously donated to the museum. For more than 5 decades, Judy Chicago has worked tirelessly at her own art, presenting her work in national and international venues in Europe, Asia, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and many other places. She is an influential teacher and author, and her art has served as a vehicle for intellectual and social transformation. Through works such as the Dinner Party, the Birth Project, and the Holocaust Project, no one has worked more tirelessly to promote the discovery of our art history and important social issues, and also no one has worked more tirelessly to reveal the hidden art history of women. She is an incredible supporter too, and I think one of the great things about Through the Flower and Judy's work is how they've supported emerging artists and women artists in helping them present their work to the public. Some of my favorite times with Judy are actually sitting near her at a dinner party and hearing all of her stories, and the stories end up being not just about her, but about all of the people that she's come to know and influence and has been influenced by over the years, and many of them are here with us today. So it is a great honor for me to welcome you to the Albuquerque Museum and to host this great panel and concert, and to introduce our host, Judy Chicago. Thank you.
Karen, is this, whose laptop is this? Huh? Is this Karen's? No. Well, I hope I don't accidentally press start when I don't mean to. Hi. Before I start, I just want to tell you a little about the format. I'm going to give a little overview of Through the Flowers' history and its accomplishments. Although actually, you'll discover that the PowerPoint Donald did is so, and aided by our assistant, Chris Hensley, is so good that I could probably just stand here and point, because a picture is worth 1,000 words, and the pictures tell the story of Through the Flowers' history. Before I introduce the other 3 panelists who are going to speak after me, I want to say something about Mary Gaucher, because those of you who have not yet expressed your support for me and Through the Flower by buying a ticket for her concert, I want to urge you to do so and just tell you a little story about how I know Mary. Some years ago, Donald and I were driving to Santa Fe, and Mary was on the radio on KUNM. And we listened to her. They played one song, and we were so impressed that we went out and bought all her CDs. Now, I can only listen to a certain kind of music in my studio. It has to be at a certain emotional level and a level of honesty and openness. And I listened to Mary a lot. Some years ago, Donald and I were a team teaching at Vanderbilt. We did this big project there. Constance will probably refer to it when she speaks. And at the opening, we were standing at the door and welcoming people. And Mary walked in, because she lives in Nashville, which of course is where Vanderbilt is. Well, you know, a lot of people come up to me and they say, "Oh, I love your work, blah, 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 blah," you know. So I'm like, "Oh, I love your work, I can't believe you're here. Oh, Mary Gaucher, I listen to all your music." She's that good. So please stay. In terms of the panelists, there are 3 other panelists. They'll all come up here one at a time and share some wonderful stories and information with you, and then we'll all 4 answer questions. All 3 of these speakers have played a pivotal role in Through the Flowers' accomplishments, and they've also played a very major role in my life. The first one, Dianne Gellan, became the administrator of the dinner party studio and the exhibition tour. Dianne Gellan changed my life. I had started on the process of working on the dinner party. With the hubris of youth, I thought I could, with my own paintbrush, tell the story of women's history, which I had discovered, and I was in a rage that it wasn't known. And the more I worked, the more information I discovered. And Dianne came to me, and she said to me, I want to do something for you that is usually done for male artists. I want to provide you assistance so that you can work. And it changed my life, because it was true. I never had that level of assistance. Of course, she spoiled me. And yesterday I was joking in the car. Dianne and Donald were both in the car, the two people in my life who have most told me what to do. And they're both telling me how to drive at the same time. The second speaker, Dianne went on to become a tax attorney in London. So she and her partner, Jillian Hanna, who was instrumental in bringing the dinner party to London, have flown here from London for the celebration. The second speaker is Constance Gee. Constance is the reason Donald and I did the project at Vanderbilt. But Constance invited us. At that time, she was married to the chancellor of Vanderbilt, and I went there to do a lecture, and she invited us to stay at the chancellor's residence. And she invited me to use their gym. And Constance and I was on the treadmill, and Constance was on the elliptical. She'll tell you more about what happened in her remarks. Anyway, people often ask how things happen. Well, this is how the dinner party curriculum happened. Constance and I love to work out, and we were working out together, and I was griping about an article I had received about a K through 12 dinner party project. I'll tell you about it later. Anyway, it was right before the dinner party was going to be permanently housed in Brooklyn, and I thought it might be a good idea to develop some guidelines for teachers who wanted to teach from the dinner party. And I knew nothing about K through 12 education, because when I was in college, it was looked down upon in the painting and sculpture department. Those were the important arts. Anyway, Constance was my guide into K through 12 education, and she also put me in touch with the people who eventually wrote the curriculum. The third speaker, and Constance will speak about the development of the curriculum. The third speaker is Karen Kiefer Boyd, who I met 10 years ago when she came to interview me in Berlin with the question, did I think my pedagogical methods could be translated into online learning? I'm like, no, absolutely not. And as I often say, Karen is the most persistent person I've ever met in my life, because in 2009, when we launched Through the Flowers online K through 12 dinner party curriculum at the National Art Educators, Karen was standing right as I walked off the stage, and I'm like, oh my God, thank God, I really need your help. And Karen has been the pivotal person spearheading the move to bring my art education archives and the dinner party curriculum to Penn State, where they will have a in perpetuity institutional life. Okay, so today we're going to talk about how a tiny little organization like Through the Flower has managed to overcome the many odds that have prevented women's achievements from entering our cultural heritage in a lasting way. Okay, could I have the first image? Through the Flower was born out of necessity almost 35 years ago, because we needed to establish a 501c3 organization that would allow us to receive the donations that made possible the completion of the dinner party. This is the dinner party studio in Santa Monica, California. By the way, Through the Flower is not a foundation. It is a small, nonprofit arts organization with big ambitions. Of course, at the time we started Through the Flower, I knew absolutely nothing about nonprofit organizations. All I knew was that come hell or high water, I was going to finish the dinner party because I had such a burning desire to share what I had learned about women's rich history. Could I have the next? The San Francisco Museum of Modern Art was scheduled to premiere the dinner party in March of 1979, then tour it to several other museums. What you see is people standing in line, sometimes 5 hours long, to get into the San Francisco Museum. But despite its initial success, the other institutions that were slated to show it canceled, much to my shock. After all, San Francisco Museum of Modern Art balances annual budget as a result of the show, which attracted national media attention, and the bookstore made so much money, they bought a computerized cash register they named Judy. But at the end of its first, quote, successful showing, the dinner party went into storage. The summer after, could I have the next? I'm sorry. The summer after the dinner party's premiere was very difficult for me. I had moved to Northern California to start work on my vision for the permanent housing of the dinner party. That's what this is, was the poster we did before the San Francisco opening. What I had learned from my study of women's history made me determined that the dinner party would not suffer the erasure that had eclipsed the contributions of so many of the women represented in the piece. In my opinion, the only way that could happen was through permanent housing. However, given that the work was in storage, how could this be accomplished? I had no idea, though I was determined to achieve this goal. Also, I still had a burning desire to make art, and in fact had already begun work on a new series of images dealing with birth and creation. But how could I continue? With the collapse of the dinner party exhibition tour, I lost everything: my large studio, my staff, my marriage. I was in debt as I'd had to borrow money to finish the piece, and I had absolutely no opportunities in the art world, as it had disdained the dinner party, even though there were people in numerous cities clamoring to see it. I used to joke it was the piece that everybody wanted to see and nobody wanted to show. At that point, all I had was the structure of Through the Flower, the dedication of a woman named Dianne Gellan, and over the next few years, hundreds of letters from people saying that if I was going to do another collaborative project, they wanted to volunteer. As for Dianne, she was determined that the dinner party was not going to languish in storage, and took it upon herself to travel around the country to meet with groups all over who wanted to bring the piece to their cities, no matter what was involved. Eventually, these efforts resulted in a national tour that expanded to Canada, then Europe, and finally Australia, bringing the dinner party to 16 venues in 6 countries on 3 continents to a viewing audience of over 1 million people. Could I have the next? Meanwhile, with the help of a woman named Mary Ross Taylor from Houston, who had coordinated the first grassroots showing of the dinner party, I started the Birth Project, which Kathy referred to, a series of 85 images celebrating birth and creation, which was exhibited in over 100 venues to a viewing audience of more than 250,000 people. Imagine, Through the Flower, a tiny nonprofit organization funded primarily by donations from people who believed in my work, was in charge of a worldwide exhibition tour of the dinner party, while providing a fiscal and organizational structure for the Birth Project, which it then toured. Even before the exhibition tour was over, Through the Flower began gifting Birth Project pieces to museums, universities, even birthing centers, in order to counter the widespread absence of female-centered images in our institutions. Could I have the next? Before long, almost all of the Birth Project work had permanent homes, though some of it ended up in museum basements, which was not something we had anticipated. In fact, recently I had a show in Canada, a dinner party-related show, which has been traveling, and the director, who had recently taken over the museum, had discovered when she got there something called the closet. The closet was filled with work that nobody was interested in the museum. And when she opened the closet, of course, it was mostly work by women, all of which she put on display. I'm just talking about the strategies institutions use to marginalize the work that belongs to them that they don't think is important. At the same time, because of a woman named Vicki Thompson Wilder, who is a scholar on my work and who organized the show Kathy talked about, the museum where she works at Florida State University in Tallahassee has a small collection of birth project work, which is deeply integrated into the university's art curriculum. And here in New Mexico, as Kathy mentioned, Through the Flower gifted a core collection of birth project work to the Albuquerque Museum, which over the years has loaned pieces to numerous exhibitions around the world. Could I have the next? By 1985, I was living in Santa Fe, where I met and married the photographer Donald Woodman. Together, we embarked on a project about the Holocaust, which took us 8 grueling years. Again, Through the Flower provided a fiscal structure for fundraising for the project. At this time, both the dinner party and the birth project were still touring under the auspices of Through the Flower, which received the rental fees, though these were allocated for administrative overhead and did not fund the Holocaust project, which Donald and I had to raise money for ourselves. Over the years, primarily because people have seen the long lines at museums waiting to see my shows, they've assumed that I was wealthy, though this was not at all true. In fact, until I was 60 years old and married to Donald, who insisted, I never even had a home of my own. I often say then my troubles began because then I had a mortgage. No, it's a joke. Moreover, I had no savings or retirement. Everything went into my projects, but I didn't care. All I cared about was making art and ensuring that women's achievements and women's images would become a permanent part of our cultural heritage. You might have noticed that I've mentioned the names of a number of dedicated people whose support has been crucial. One reason that I have cited their efforts is to demonstrate that it is because of a succession of volunteers, of devoted volunteers, that Through the Flower and I have been able to accomplish so many of our goals. And I have in my notes to mention them, but I'm behind schedule, and Martha Burke is going to stand up with a sign saying 5 seconds, so they can introduce themselves to you later, okay? Could I have the next? Early in the 1990s, I began to receive letters from female university art students complaining that they were learning little or nothing about women's art history or the feminist art movement. At that time, Through the Flower occupied the front rooms of the Santa Fe house that Donald and I rented from Mary Ross Taylor, where it had only one staff person and a tiny operating budget that was derived primarily from board pledges. Nevertheless, we started a series of public programs aimed at countering the absence of information cited by the students. Using borrowed facilities, we held art workshops, film showings, lectures, and panel discussions, usually to crowded audiences. By 1996, Donald and I were living in Berlin, and a few years later, the board initiated a small capital campaign to buy a 1,700 square foot building across the street from us. By this time, the seat of the pants organization that Through the Flower had been had evolved into a small but efficient operation with a full-time executive director and a half-time assistant. Still, our annual budget was only $100,000 to $150,000 a year, raised every year from board pledges, donations, sales of merchandise, bye-bye. Put your money where your heart is, that we had accumulated over the years of touring exhibitions, revenues that I assigned to Through the Flower, and an occasional windfall like the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie being made on Becker Avenue in Berlin. Why he picked our town to make his comeback movie, I have no idea. Nevertheless, we embarked upon an ambitious program of exhibitions, public conversations about feminist issues, along with an honors program in which we paid homage to feminist foremothers like Lucy Lepard, Mae Stevens, Harmony Hammond, and Charlene Teeters, each of whom presented lectures at various sites along Through the Flower's New Mexico Women's Cultural Corridor, another project which was aimed at drawing attention to some of the sites devoted to women in New Mexico. At one point, this was my favorite, I walked across the street to Through the Flower and saw two people from Canada watching historic videos in our little video viewing area while planning their motorcycle trip up the New Mexico Women's Cultural Corridor. That was really cool. Could I have the next? In 2007, through the vision of Elizabeth Sackler, who acquired and gifted the dinner party to the Brooklyn Museum, its permanent housing finally became a reality when it opened as the centerpiece of the Elizabeth A. Sackler Center for Feminist Art, the only such center in the world. By the way, the dinner party and the Sackler Center account for between 1/4 and 1/3 of the visitorship to the museum. And when other museum staffs are being cut, the Sackler Center has just doubled its staff. As I told you, I was going to tell you a little bit about Vanderbilt. 2 years prior to the opening, Donald and I were team teaching there. And over the years, there had been many K through 12 teachers who had used the dinner party in their classes, one of whom is here, in fact. You might want to seek her out to see what she's been doing. Often sending information about their projects to Through the Flower, which assembled an archive of such teaching materials. One day, I received an email about one such project that was intended as a tribute to me and the piece. Although the project was well intended, it offended me because it involved making autobiography plates. It was a perfectly good project. It was just in direct contradiction to the purpose of the dinner party, which is about teaching women's history through art. By then, I had met and become crazy about Constance, who is an author and an art educator, actually, an expert in art and public policy. I spoke to her about my concerns, suggesting that now that the dinner party was going to be permanently housed, perhaps it would be wise to develop some guidelines for K through 12 teachers interested in incorporating the piece into their classrooms. Constance was my guide in K through 12 education, about which I knew very little. She introduced me to the renowned curriculum writer, Marilyn Stewart, who together with colleagues at Kutztown University helped develop a comprehensive curriculum, which Through the Flower launched in 2009 at the New Mexico State House in Santa Fe. The curriculum was available, you can't teach online art education. The curriculum was available as, guess what, a series of free, downloadable PDF files on Through the Flower's website. Live and learn. Almost immediately, the small staff of Through the Flower was overwhelmed with requests from around the world. By the way, I want to point out that we could never have afforded to produce such a curriculum. Once again, everyone volunteered their time and their expertise, including me. It seems important to point out that I've never received a salary from Through the Flower, but rather have actually helped to raise the money for its various projects. In fact, I often quip that I pay to work, but I don't care. Well, I care a little more now that I have a mortgage. What I care about is trying to change history by insisting that women's achievements, and women's art must become part of that history if it is to be anything but a partial and distorted record of the human race. Could I have the next? This brief history of Through the Flower brings us to today and the reason that we are holding this celebration. I have described what a small organization Through the Flower is, but as I have often joked, small but mighty. Against the odds, we have managed to intercede in the ongoing erasure of women's achievements and have done so in a way that will last. My study of history taught me that there have been other periods of time when women have pushed forward only to have their strides eliminated from the historic record or reduced to a seemingly insignificant footnote in otherwise male-dominated stories. The best example of that is that at the end of the 19th century, Susan B. Anthony was so known and so beloved that when she appeared in any venue at the Women's Building at the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, which she had helped, the Women's Building she had helped to establish, tens of thousands of people stood on their chairs and cheered her. Within 2 decades, she was nothing but a footnote in the history books. From this study, I deduced that one problem that women have had is that we have not been able to establish or infiltrate institutions in a lasting way. Thus, my insistence that the dinner party had to be permanently housed, and Through the Flowers' decision to gift birth project work to institutions around the country. The other problem has been a lack of support. Even though it was the vision of a single woman, Elizabeth Sackler, that finally secured permanent housing, it was the support of all of those who have supported Through the Flower in large and small ways that made it possible to care for and protect the dinner party until permanent housing could be achieved. Similarly, although Dr. Karen Kiefer Boyd and Penn State University stepped forward to offer an institutional home to the dinner party curriculum, at which, as I said, it will be kept online in perpetuity, and the art archives of both Through the Flower and my own, it has been Through the Flower and its many supporters that have provided the framework for all this work to be done and sent out into the world, where it attracted the attention of Karen, her dean, and her school. And the dean will greet you at the end of our panel. In 2014, Penn State will be doing a campus-wide celebration of my art education curriculum. Archives, that's too many words, of my art education archives. By then, the dinner party curriculum will have become part of the university's art education programs. Hopefully, Penn State will be able to meet the needs of all those teachers around the world who wrote to us because they were so hungry to discover how best to teach the history embodied by the dinner party. Later in this program, as I said, you will hear directly from Karen and a few words from her dean about their plans. Could I have the last? Right now, I want to end my remarks by saying that the story of Through the Flower is a story of the passion, commitment, and hard work of innumerable people over many decades. What this small organization has accomplished is a testament to the power of art and the importance of individuals, and should induce hope in the hearts of everyone who despairs that the world cannot be changed. Thank you.
I'm Dianne Gellan. Against the odds. I need my glasses. Yep. Against the odds, the dinner party toured to San Francisco, Houston, Boston, Brooklyn, Cleveland, Chicago, Atlanta, Montreal, Toronto, Calgary, Edinburgh, London, Frankfurt, Melbourne, Los Angeles, Brooklyn, and permanent housing. But there are lots of places that it didn't go, and that list is almost as impressive. In 1978, I started actively moving around the country, having meetings with museum directors. In February 1978, I met with John Walsh at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. I met with Stephen Prokopov at the ICA in Boston. I met with Lou Story, who is at the Denver Art Museum. In March of 1978, I met with the Cleveland Art Museum. I went to the Art Institute in Chicago and the Field Museum in Chicago. In May of 1978, I met with Charles Millard at the Hirshhorn in Washington, D.C. In November of 1978, I met with Mary Jane Jacob and John Neff at the Detroit Art Museum. I met with Gerald Nordland at the Milwaukee Art Center. I met with Charles Coles at the Seattle Art Museum. I met with Ellen Lee and Bob Yassin at the Indianapolis Museum of Art, and I met with Sam Sachs at the Walker Art Center. Continued on and met with Jim Harithis at the Contemporary Art Museum in Houston. I met with Bob Murdoch at the Dallas Museum of Art, and I met with Ann Livett at the Fort Worth Art Museum. And finally, I met with Anne Roramore at the Art Institute again in Chicago, and with John Armstrong at the Phoenix Art Museum, all before the dinner party opened, all trying to put together a tour for the dinner party. After the dinner party opened, I met with Jay Spinks at the National Gallery in Washington, D.C. I went to Rochester, Seattle Art Museum, and continued on another meeting at the Chicago Arts Institute, the Portland Art Museum, and again in Boston at the ICA. So it's amazing that we went to the places that we did and managed to pull together a tour, which is not easy. Those meetings were mostly instigated by women in their communities who wanted to bring the dinner party to their town, who wanted to see the dinner party. And I think I had those meetings mostly as an accommodation, mostly by museum directors and curatorial staff who didn't want to be seen to reject it outright, who may have had other excuses like size, shape, columns, the building wasn't big enough, or that they already had exhibitions scheduled. I was asked to say how I first met Judy. I met Judy first in 1973 when I walked into the opening of the Women's Building in Los Angeles, and I bought a work of art. Because it was the first, I bought the cheapest drawing that I could afford. It was $300 out of the Great Ladies series. It was the first time, at that time I was a graduate student in art history. I was in a doctoral program studying. And it was the first time that I had ever seen work that really spoke to me as a woman. And I was completely moved and completely overwhelmed. And it changed my life. Judy changed my life. I may have changed hers, but she changed mine. I eventually started to work on the dinner party. It's a sort of crazy story, but we stayed in touch. I did some peripheral work through the Women's Building. And she came to me one day and said, "Dianne, I need somebody to do a little bit of research," saying that I was an art historian. Maybe I would know something about, how to go to a library. She said, "I need the names of about 1,000 women. How fast do you think you can do it?" And I, in my stupidity and craziness of youth, said 6 weeks, no problem. 10 years later, I'm still working with her. I started working with her, but we had a memorable moment, and it started with a walk on the beach. The sun is setting. I get her to reveal her dreams and her plans of what she had in her head for the dinner party. And she started to open up and explain that she saw it as a three-pronged work, a work that would be so large that it couldn't be erased from history. It would be an exhibition, a book, and a film. I'm sitting, it's quiet, we're on the beach in Santa Barbara, and I feel like, that old story that if a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, does it make a noise? Unfortunately, I was there to hear it. I'm hearing this tree fall, I'm hearing this noise, and now I have to do something with this information. I feel like I can't let it sit as if it wasn't there, and the tree, didn't make a noise. And I thought, I can't go back to graduate school. I couldn't finish my doctorate. I had already done 3 years, and I realized that from my own history, I knew about the Renaissance model of patronage. I knew the 19th century model of art dealers. I knew that one needs to build an audience for art, and I know that it takes an art historian to ensure the legacy of a work. So on the spot, I self-appointed myself as the dinner party administrator. In some ways for me, because I was the administrator, I didn't do anything on the dinner party. Making the piece for me was the easy part, because I just sat in the corner and, and did admin stuff, help people integrate into the studio. So, the only obstacles to come when you make a work of art is, you had a lot of broken plates, you had Judy, going crazy about, the way we had no money, we had very little time. The runners were taking as long as 8 to 10 months to complete. But what was important is that we had the support of one man, and that man was Henry Hopkins, who was the director of the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, and that made the difference. The seeds to travel the work go back to 1977, because we needed a system and a support to finish the piece, and we needed a way to really go out into the world and to raise money, even at that early stage. And we needed to, I thought we needed to leave the comfort zone of the Santa Monica studio to raise funds. And so in 1977, with my good buddy over there, Juliet Myers, we went to Houston. We went to Houston where there was that last famous effort to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. And it was a political celebration. There were thousands of women be there, and we decided that the dinner party had to have a presence. And at that time, Juliet's so much better at this than I ever was, but she loved to meet people, greet people, and to really flirt with people. And she started flirting with a woman named Lael Stiegel. And Lael Stiegel at that point was the executive director of the National Women's Political Caucus. And I don't know how Lael became entranced. We weren't political. We were there as a small little organization. But what Lael did was she took me back to Washington and she opened up her Rolodex. Before Blackberries, before whatever, she had a nice Rolodex. And through her contacts, we secured an additional NEA grant. We had a Ford Foundation grant, and I started to meet women from the political sphere who could help us. So the dinner party opens in San Francisco. I'm hurrying. 100,000 people go to see it. The lines form around the block, the largest attended show in their history. They sell books, posters, postcards. So much, as Judy said, that they have to buy a new cash register, which they call Judy. The art critics didn't know what to make of it. The feminists love it. The art critics had their out. If it's not a work of art, it doesn't fit easily into their notion of what a work of art is. Is it sculpture? Is it painting? No, it's needlework, so it must be craft. It's porcelain plate, so it must be pottery. It's china paint, so it has to be a hobby. But wait, it's created by an artist. But the artist is a feminist, so she can't be an artist. She writes books, she creates institutions. She can't be all those things and still be an artist. That would make her like a Renaissance woman. And this is 1979, and you can't be that in 1979. So the show closes, Judy retreats, I continue to plug away, and I took to the road, literally to answer everything. And I know it's the end, and I'm going to go very quickly, really quickly. But it went to a lot of places. I just want to tell you this story about Brooklyn because, it went to a lot of alternative spaces with women in the community, but it also went to Brooklyn. And so you say, it went to a museum. Isn't that a good thing? But what happened is that we bought our way into that museum. There was a group of political women. I had an office at Doubleday. Doubleday needed the dinner party to tour. Judy had written a book. Judy had written 2 books. They needed it to be out on the road. And so they gave me a space, a little office in the corner. Even Jackie Onassis in those days would smile at me as I walked through the hallways because she thought I worked there. And I was literally there for nearly a year organizing to bring the dinner party to New York. We had people with names like Rockefeller supporting us. Judy came as well, eventually got her out of her studio, but it was always a fight. It took the president of the First Women's Bank to get in touch with a woman who worked in the mayor's the director's office, the councilman's office in Brooklyn, who eventually wrote a letter to Michael Botwinick. And Michael Botwinick, after a hell of a lot of pressure and a lot of people with a lot of moneyed people, finally said, well, we recognize that people very much want to see the dinner party. And that's how it happened. They raised $100,000 and they gave it to the museum, and that's how the piece came to the Brooklyn Museum. It didn't come there out of magic. It didn't come there out of love by a museum director. and it traveled to spaces that Judy would never have wanted to travel to. It traveled in Houston. It was shown in a space where they also played basketball. It was shown in an old synagogue. It was shown on the top floor of a building in Chicago that eventually became an apartment building. Yes, it toured, but it was really against the odds that all of this happened. And I just want to read one thing, sorry. Because after it toured, it comes back, and Through the Flower is really important, its importance in terms of raising money for permanent housing. And suddenly, Judy, they did a lot of groundwork, and the dinner party was going to be gifted in 1990 to the University of the District of Columbia. Washington, D.C. is a very strange city because it's really governed by Congress. And somehow, somewhere, God knows, these boys in Congress and a couple of women in those times, I don't know what possessed them, but for an hour they spoke about the dinner party. And Mr. Dornan of California said the following: "We now have the pornographic art, I mean three-dimensional ceramic art of 39 women's vaginal area, their genitalia served up on plates that requires a whole room at the University of the District of Columbia to be set aside, a room that needs $650,000 of roof repair, and they're asking us for $60 million more, and we are supposed to not find some vehicle to send them a message. Here's the headline of one of the papers in this city with a color picture, a long shot of this dinner table art that was created at the cost of $250,000 a decade ago, and NEA was not a big problem then because we did not know what was going on. It got $36,500 of tax dollars, and the 39 place settings at this disgusting dinner table are supposed to be great women in history, including some women authors, one of whom said she is disgusted and appalled that her name would dare appear at the 39th place setting." You wonder who the hell that was. Not a clue. Ron Dellums, who is a congressman from Oakland, got up and said, "The gentleman used the term pornography, and he raised a question of the difficulty of dealing with moral issues. With respect to the issue of pornography, I think that it is pornography to see a nuclear weapon standing erect with only one function. And that is to destroy human life on this planet beyond comprehension. Pornographic military weapons that look like phallic symbols, capable of doing nothing but destroying human life on this planet. Do you want to talk about pornography? You want to talk about deadly art? We deal with pornography every single day, but we don't talk about it in this context. I find war immoral. I find poverty immoral. I find the fact that we can all drive home from our jobs at our various homes throughout this country and see thousands of human beings eating from garbage cans and living in homelessness. That is immoral." And I will leave it with Mr. Dellums. The rest is history.
Hi, I'm Constance Ski, and I'm really happy to be here today. I'm very proud. It falls to me to tell you a little about how Through the Flower, our patron saint, Judy Chicago, and a small university in Kutztown, Pennsylvania, all little engines that could, came together to create a K-12 curriculum based on the dinner party. When I say curriculum, I mean an entire course of study that, like the dinner party itself, seeks to spark the ember of awareness and then to fan that ember into the flame of inspiration and active participation. I first met Judy Chicago and her husband and frequent collaborator, Donald Woodman, at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. They had been invited by the Women's Center to give a lecture in conjunction with an exhibition of selected work from the At Home Project. At Home, as many of you know, was a teaching residency that Chicago and Woodman conducted at Western Kentucky University in 2001 that probed into participants' social and emotional associations with home. At Home grew out of the art installation and performance piece Woman House, the first exhibition of feminist art, constructed 3 decades earlier by Judy Chicago, Miriam Shapiro, and 26 young women enrolled at the California Institute of the Arts Feminist Art Program. It just so happened that when I found out about Chicago and Woodman's visit to Vanderbilt, I was able to offer them a nice place to stay. I was, at the time, the First Lady of Vanderbilt, then married to the University Chancellor Gordon Gee. I was thrilled when they accepted my invitation to stay at the Vanderbilt University's Chancellor's residence. Judy and I formed an immediate bond in our exercise room during an animated discussion of our views on the ways art is taught in school settings from kindergarten through university. Judy was on the treadmill, I was on the elliptical. She was kvetching about the incomplete way that many university art studio programs go about training young artists. You know, the professor strolling through the studio, commenting on students' work, the dynamics or lack thereof of color, line, form, and space, mostly thrusting forms in space. It doesn't seem to have changed since I was in art school, she huffed. Yep, that was pretty much my experience too, I agreed. A young artist might become knowledgeable about the elements and principles of design, and if she works hard, technically proficient in her chosen medium. Yet that knowledge and skill, as important as it is, doesn't always satisfy in and of itself. Young people need to be helped to find their own voice, Judy projected over the pounding of her feet and the hum of the machines. A primary goal of art education, we agreed, should be to help students identify and express that which is most important to them in a way that also makes it meaningful to others. To help them communicate something worth thinking about in a way that allows other people to understand the idea, and with that understanding, contribute to the collective power of the idea. Is that not what our most enduring art brings to humanity? As Judy jogged along beside me, she began talking about how she taught, how she made certain that each student had the emotional and intellectual space and support to develop and speak about their concerns and ideas and what they wanted to say with their artwork. She explained how she would begin with the students' ideas and then introduce the students to the work of other artists who had wrestled with and successfully communicated something about similar issues. She sought to help young artists move the personal toward the universal. That is, she wanted to help them identify and express that which was most important to them in a way that also made it meaningful for others. Working the elliptical, I said, your description of teaching, well, that's pretty much the way the K-12 art education community has been trying to do it since the 70s. And then, breathing heavily, I began to tell her about the steady progress of content or inquiry-based teaching within the field of K-12 visual arts education. That of guiding young people in the exploration of big ideas and essential questions about the human experience and the natural world. I explained that the students' study of enduring works of art across time and cultures and their own making of art in relation to these enduring human concerns is seen as the means for human connectivity and individual expression and growth. "Oh my God, that's incredible," she exclaimed. And then she went flying off the back of the treadmill, severing the tendon in the back of her right knee. She was most impressed by the prompt care she received at the Vanderbilt Medical Center's emergency room. It is amazing how a call from the Chancellor to the Dean of Medicine can clear the way for speedy attention to an injured university guest. Almost 2 years passed, during which Judy and I and the board of Through the Flower, which I had then joined, continued discussing the importance of education to our mission and the virtually unlimited possibilities of imbuing the next generation with the lessons of the dinner party via K through 12 education. After all, K through 12 schooling is largely compulsory. If we could produce a comprehensive curriculum that provided teachers and their students multiple entry points into women's contributions across all forms of human endeavor, government and law, medicine, science, religion, philosophy, and art, we could take a big step towards stopping the erasure of women's lives and achievements, one classroom, one school at a time. Our aim was, and remains, no less than to institutionalize the dinner party into the general school curricula. In the meantime, I introduced Judy and the board to the ideas of the most prominent art educators, to thinking soundly simpatico with Judy's teaching philosophy and instructional methods. One of these art educators was Dr. Marilyn Stewart of Kutztown University, co-author of the excellent book, Rethinking Curriculum in Art. Judy's hair was blown back. She found a pedagogical soulmate in Marilyn, who eventually joined the Through the Flower board. In summer 2006, we had a weekend retreat with a small group of art educators, including Marilyn, to brainstorm about the proposed curriculum. What would its core principles be? How would it be structured? Who would write it? How would we go about test driving it? What physical form would it ultimately assume? We made a few false starts over the next several months, which was very discouraging. We had about $4,000 to launch the project. We'd already spent half of that and didn't seem to have anything to show for it. Judy, Marilyn, and I were sweating bullets. We couldn't squander this opportunity. Basically, we needed a team of experts in art education curriculum development to work for free, to donate hundreds of hours of thinking, planning, and writing. Marilyn approached her faculty colleagues at the Department of Art Education and Crafts at Kutztown University. Marilyn and Judy have much in common in their ability to inspire people to take on vastly time-consuming projects for well, no recompense other than the grand feeling that you're doing something that really matters. That's leadership. That's chutzpah. That's overcoming the odds. Doctors Peg Spear and Carrie Nordland joined us, and the rest of the Kutztown art education faculty gave Marilyn, Peg, and Carrie their blessing. In June 2007, a week-long curriculum institute was held at Kutztown to introduce and build on what would ultimately become the dinner party curriculum. 50 elementary, middle, and secondary teachers, mostly visual arts teachers, attended. These teachers contributed significantly to the development of the curriculum as they worked through and critiqued various parts of it. The teachers took what they had learned back from the Institute back to their classrooms, expanded on it throughout the following year, and then sent their lesson plans, comments, and ideas back to the curriculum team at Kutztown. It is amazing to me what all has happened since the first Dinner Party Institute. A beautifully designed and easily navigated dinner party curriculum website went online in 2009. Anyone can type dinner party curriculum into their computer, go straight to the source, and download the entire curriculum for free, and thousands have. Just a minute more. Marilyn and her colleagues have held a week-long Dinner Party Curriculum Institute every summer since 2007 and have now been funded by Through the Flower to do so for 5 more years. It is impossible for me to relate to you how much planning and preparation goes into these Summers Institutes, most of it still gifted as a labor of love. Every summer, Judy accompanies the Institute participants to see the dinner party at the Elizabeth A. Sackler Center for Feminist Art at the Brooklyn Museum of Art. What a way to see the dinner party, right? The dinner party curriculum continues to grow and deepen with the curricular contributions of K through 12 art and classroom teachers and art education graduate students. It is a living curriculum, an evolving organism. The Minks Auerbach Education Award was established in 2009 to encourage students to use and expand on the dinner party curriculum. $1,000 is presented each year to the teacher who has best implemented the curriculum. Deborah Philbin, this year's recipient, is with us today. Deborah, would you raise your hand? The ceremony is held in New York when all the Dinner Party Institute participants come into the city to see the dinner party with Judy. The Pennsylvania State University, my alma mater, I am proud to say, has entered into an agreement with Through the Flower and will maintain in perpetuity the dinner party curriculum online. Penn State will also house Judy Chicago's education archives, just as the Schlesinger Library on the history of women in art houses the archives documenting her artwork. And Through the Flower, the little engine that thought she could and damn well did, has raised over $160,000 to make this happen. Some of you here today have contributed generously to these efforts. Thank you. The Art World Scorn Dinner Party found a magnificent home at the Brooklyn Museum, an expansive, content-rich curriculum designed to teach school children ages 5 through 18 about the lives, lore, and achievements of women has found a global home. Maybe the odds are turning in our favor. Thank you, Judy.
Thank you. Well, it's an honor to be on this panel, and it's an honor to be here with supporters of Judy Chicago, Through the Flower, and feminist art education. I begin with talking about empowerment because that's what feminist art education is. Empowerment emerges from the opportunities for voice and choice. The newly acquired Penn State Judy Chicago Art Education Collection provides resources on the development of feminist art pedagogy towards these goals. My commitment is to an art education that builds agency, and empowerment for all through arts-based research, content-based art, and critical reflective dialogue. These three practices are integral to the Judy Chicago's teaching methodology. The content-based artworks and process of their making and the development of feminist pedagogy by Judy Chicago, begun in the 1970s and then again revisited 30 years later, 1990 to 2005, is now a resource for teaching and research archives at Penn State. For the collection, we've created a website, and which will continue to grow. And on opening the website, you will see this video of Judy very dramatically, as you can see here, conveys why we need to develop a feminist archival sensibility to end omissions and erasures. We have digitized, for all to have access via the internet, a selection of about 300 slides from the many slides that are in this collection from each of the 11 Judy Chicago teaching projects archived at Penn State. So when you come to the site, you can see the 11 teaching projects, and below you can click on that and look at the 300 slides that we have digitized. The finding aid is there, as well as many other resources. In June 2003, Judy Chicago invited me to observe her teach artists and professors her approach to teaching art. The Visioning the Future project in Pomona, California, in fall 2003, is the first time that Judy Chicago has taught her art teaching methodology to others. During the 3-month project, Envisioning the Future, I studied, in dialogue with Judy, the translation of her methodology by the 8 facilitators, Judy emphasized content searches and research prior to setting art-making goals, which is prior to selecting art media. Very different than what we find, and I've been at several different universities with their studio programs. Judy Chicago's teaching methodology is similar in many ways to how she approaches art making. Her methodology guides how to find and translate one's lived experiences into visual form that exposes and engages a larger audience than oneself in that particular context. When you look at the artworks produced within Judy Chicago's 11 very different teaching projects, they stimulate discussion. The artworks are incredibly powerful. So what are the ways that art educators can work with the Judy Chicago Art Education Collection? From my discussion with Judy, with K through 12 teachers and feminist art education researchers, we began to generate some directions for teaching and research with the Judy Chicago Art Education Collection. I list several on the handout that is on the seats out there, that salmon color or orange color handout. I also invite you to share your ideas at the National Art Education Association Women's Caucus Facebook site or their blog site. So you don't have to register anything, you can just go and click a comment. So things that you think that should be asked, that should be researched. And as you can see on that handout, there's just a sort of a brainstorm of about 9 different directions right there. And working with not only at Penn State and guiding a lot of dissertations and such, but also in colleagues and throughout the United States and beyond, and in all these research steering kinds of committees, I hope to make this happen. So it's really important for you to say, what do we need? Where do we need the research? What questions can we ask? So I do hope that you'll go to the website there. Again, that's on the handout out there. And you can link to this Voices blog and add your ideas. Penn State is planning a series of a series of campus-wide outreach events honoring Judy Chicago to take place in spring 2014. This will include at the Palmer Museum of Art, surveying Judy Chicago 1970 to 210 exhibition and the dinner party plate drawings. At the Hub Robinson Gallery will be works that in some way relate to Judy Chicago, because it'll the National Association of Women Artists 125th anniversary exhibition. And in a lot of ways, that does what the dinner party is intending to do concerning a counterpoint to erasure and omission of women's accomplishments. We are also pursuing an exhibition of work by Judy Chicago's students, and also performance of original work that is stimulated from the collection in what we have this annual event called Cultural Conversations. Additionally, a film series related to Chicago's work, and a symposium with Judy Chicago, and we hope that you will come to that. Additionally, I began these teaching conversations with faculty from architecture, film, communications, art history, theater, visual arts, art education, biomedical health, English, utopian studies, information science and technology, curriculum instruction, archives, and women's studies to engage in conversations about our teaching and we've begun these in this fall, 2011, about the Judy Chicago Art Education Collection. This shot over here is one of the groups there talking about this, and how we can bring it into our teaching. And these conversations are recorded and transcribed, become part of the archives. So people like I called it the 12 Fabulous Feminists, but then people said, can you have more than 12? So it has grown from that. And so these conversations then, what we are planning to do, and like I said, the range of the biomedical health, and she works with obesity and a variety of different things, they can see reason to
use the collection for their teaching and will be integrating in their curriculum in fall 2013. And it'll be showcased, the work that comes from the students all over campus in spring 2014. We're also, from the transcriptions, writing about this too, so we can look at the impact of this collection beyond art and art education, because it does have impact wider than that. In addition, Penn State Public Broadcasting is exploring the possibility of a documentary film on Judy Chicago's career, and also a multimedia website that would bring the dinner party to audiences around the world. I conclude my presentation with a 2-minute video by filmmaker Christian Berg, who works for Penn State Public Broadcasting. And he read the press release that came out about the collection coming to Penn State and called me, and in a couple days we raised $10,000 and to film, and that's how much this cost to do these kinds of projects, to film it just a couple times. And one was at the dinner party Summer Institute that Constant presented with us, and there were 30 teachers this summer there. And also he came to Judy Chicago's home in Berlin to interview her, and also to record a little bit about the packing up of the Judy Chicago collection. Now he's working towards creating an American Master-style film about Judy Chicago's career. The master designation of this film series, which was begun in 1986, that's American Masters, is clearly gendered male more than linguistically, because, well, you know, if it was American Mistresses, it might get viewers, but with very different value expectations. Now, American Masters is gendered male in content too. He discovered that this PBS series of biographies of artists, actors, and writers of the United States who have had a profound impact have produced 22 episodes on visual artists. How many do you think are on women? Two. So we, Christian Berg is approaching American Masters about including a Judy Chicago episode in the 2013-2014 season. So let's end with watching this 2-minute sort of excerpt of what he's gathered right now. We need to do a lot of fundraising and to make this all happen, but that's what we hope to happen. So let me get out of this and...
Judy Chicago was just a big influence on my artwork, so this is a dream come true. I'm speechless.
I still have goosebumps thinking about when I walked into the room the first time. I said it was probably the closest thing to a religious experience I ever had.
People come from all over the world to see it. And so I think that that attests to its ongoing relevance.
Is that an M or
Yes,
a W?
it's an M.
Like mother?
Millennium.
Millennium? Okay. I
Because
didn't know.
in the
that.
70s, we all thought there was going to be equality by the millennium. And I'm like, oh, well, try the next millennium, maybe. I certainly am not finished with the project of introducing it to art educators so that it can have a long life and generations of young people can grow up with the idea that women's history is a normal part of human history.
Arnold's not the only one.
That is what that is. I can't believe we don't have a color photograph of that.
One of the reasons I'm so thrilled about my art education archive going to Penn State and being integrated into their curriculum, into their programs, into their online masters. And this is, of course, the famous sheet closet. It's something that we women have not had enough of, seeing our ideas transmitted through institutions to the future.
Okay, Okay. Dean Barbara Dawson from Penn State is just going to say a few words of greeting to you, and then we'll have time for just a couple of questions. And then you're all going to run out and get concert tickets, right? Mary Gaucher is going to kick ass.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you so much. I bring warm greetings from Penn State, and I just wanted you to know that not only is it a great university, and Constance is one of our wonderful alums, it's one of the premier public universities in the world, and our library is one of the top 10 research libraries in North America. So this collection is going to have a very good home. We're going to give it great visibility. We're going to bring it to the dinner table of worldwide scholarship, and we're so excited. I hope you will all come personally to visit as well as virtually. So greetings from everyone at Penn State. Thank you.
Okay, so where's Mary and, yes, and where are the portable mics? No, I thought there was another one. One? Okay, I just want to point out that some of the people here on our advisory committee who were here to greet you are very distinguished, like Juliet Myers, who calls herself a dinner party leftover, who's the curator of public programs at Site Santa Fe. Mary Kershaw, who is the director of the New Mexico Museum of Art in Santa Fe, and they're going to bring around the mic to you for a couple of questions, okay? Have you got a mic? Who has a question?
And if you have a really loud voice, you probably don't need me. I just wondered, will you be doing this program anywhere else, this particular program that we were privileged to be here for today? Are you taking this act on the road?
Yeah, I suppose if somebody comes forward and funds it, you have to realize everybody's self-funded to come here. So you're really privileged because they flew from all over the world. We all pay to work.
But we did film it, so we're going to web stream it.
Oh, I forgot. Right. Online, right.
What else? Other questions?
No, really.
Where did you get that blouse, Judy?
I don't recall that you talked about the people who worked on the dinner party, the various people who did the different plates and the different settings, and how you found them, and how you approached having each one, how many people worked on this?
Do you want me to answer that?
Oh, you want to answer it?
Yeah. Do you know, I have a story that is true, absolutely, that whenever Judy would say, "Oh my God, we need a graphic artist," there'd be someone at the door the next day saying, "Hi, I'm a graphic artist, and I'd like to work on the dinner party project." And it would happen, but you know, people came from far and wide, sometimes for a month in the summer because they were students on break. Sometimes people came and stayed too long at the ball. Some of us stayed for 6 years. I worked for Judy for 12 years, first on the dinner party and then as her assistant here in New Mexico. But there were wait, don't let me exaggerate. I said yesterday on the radio that the dinner party was 55 feet long on a wing of that great equilateral triangle, and Judy screamed that it was only 48. But who's counting? Judy may want to answer a little more about, your question's a very good one. There were over 400 people who came to work on the dinner party. I thought it was 500, I was trying to be. But many people came, but came for different durations of time, and each brought their extraordinary personal passion and talent, skills like woodworking, women who could build looms.
I just want to say that if you want to really know about the dinner party, the book outside called The Dinner Party from Creation to Preservation tells the whole story of the dinner party. Moreover, on the end papers, on the opening end papers are the names of all the people who worked on it. But you want to know something? The making of the dinner party was the fun part and the easy part. On the back end papers are the names of all the people who worked to get it exhibited, to care for it, to store it, pay the storage bills, set up the alternative institutions, and make sure that the dinner party was safe until it could be permanently housed. Thanks very much. See you outside. We have to empty the room so Mary can set up, and then we'll be back.
Any other questions? Ask Judy when you buy your book.
Ain't I a woman, says Sojourner Truth. Ain't I a woman? Ain't I a woman, says Sojourner Truth. Ain't I a woman? I can work as much, eat as much as any man when I can get it. I plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and look at me, I'm a woman. Ain't I a woman, say Sojourner Truth. Ain't I a woman? Ain't I a woman, say Sojourner Truth.